We're all packing, we're getting ready to go. And I love this visual, right? Because we all have stuff. We have luggage, we have stuff, we've learned stuff, we've engaged, we've had new conversations, we've learned new tools, right? And as we're packing up our stuff, we're deciding what to leave in the package, what to leave in our luggage, what luggage just to leave there and come home with new stuff, right? We collect new tools. So we're gonna be on this journey together. I have a couple of goals in this. One is to keep you all awake and to keep you guys here until I'm done speaking, so wish me luck. The second goal I have is to not mention courts at all. You think I can do it? Let's see. Let's see. Thank you for being courageous on this journey with us. So the first thing I would like to ask you all is, how do you identify yourself, right? So we all have our stuff. And the lens in which we look at things is really how we're able to decide how we see the world, right? What stuff? I know this is a paperless conference, so I'm gonna ask you to just kind of use your phone or think about it. If you had to think about 5 ways that you describe yourself, what are those 5 things? Just take a moment, because when you engage with other people, I want you to think about these 5 things, because you will learn, in general, you have more in common with people than you have differences. There are ways that you can find that you can relate to folks that you never thought about before. Take a moment. This is a real activity. And think about it. So, if you look at me, he introduced me as a judge. That is not actually how I introduce myself. That is not how I think of myself. The way I think of myself is, those are my 5 circles. If you had paper, I would have you do it. I'm a woman, so I look at life through that lens of being a woman, right? I'm a mother of 2. I look at life as being a mother, and a mother of children of color, and that is significant, especially in this day and time, right? I look at myself as a person of color, because that allows me to see the world through a certain lens. And so when I engage with people, I have to remember that that's one of the lenses in which I look at things through. I'm a total nerd. You didn't get that from looking at me. I love Lord of the Rings. I love Marvel, not DC. There is a distinction. I love Star Wars, not Star Trek. There is a distinction, right? I believe in capes and superheroes and superpowers. So when I meet you, I may ask you, what's your superpower? What's the thing that's unique about you? What do you bring into the room? That is how I look at the world. I'm also a world traveler. I think the best education we can have in the world is to go to other places and to understand how privileged we are to be here in this country, to understand what it is that we can offer other folks, to look at stuff through a universal lens. There's things that we're taught here in this country that are not true. There are things that we're taught here about history that are not true, right? And I think we've heard some of that throughout their conference, right? And so these things are important. How do you look at yourself, and what things are you bringing into the room when you go? So, if you remember, the title we talked about adversaries, agitators, right? And advocates or allies. So my question to you is, do you know the difference? And how do you define them? So we're talking about an adversary. It can be defined as one's opponent in a contest, conflict, dispute, or your enemy. I think in 2020 we decided we had a lot of enemies, did we not? No matter what your political view was, you were told every day that someone was your enemy. Am I wrong? Okay. And then we saw people who I define as agitators, right? They're folks who are stirring up stuff. No matter what your political view was, there was someone who was stirring the pot because they didn't like the status quo. And the truth of the matter is that with agitators, we kind of need them because change wouldn't happen without them. So no matter what side of the political coin you're on, you need an agitator, because things don't change without someone forcing you into change, right? You agree, you disagree? Okay. And I know sometimes we saw protesters, no matter what the protester was, there were the protesters that were doing things about change and having their message heard, and there were also disruptors within the protest, right, who tore up some things, vandalized some things, no matter what side of the argument you're on. 2 big events, well, there were several such events, right? And depending on your political views, you probably saw them differently, right? So let's look a little bit. I switched the pictures because depending on how you see the world, either one could have been an adversary or they could have been an agitator. Let's take a look. What do you think? First video, second video. Who were your agitators? Who were your adversaries? Any thoughts? I won't force you to answer, but think about it. Unless one feels so compelled that they have a particular point of view. Yes? First group. First group who were storming the Capitals were adversaries, she said. What made them the adversary? It seems as though they were attacking our democracy and everything that the country stands for. Yes? Absolutely, that's why I asked you guys to move to the front. I forgot to tell you, my goal in life is to make everyone a little bit uncomfortable. So if anyone spent time with me yesterday and we had a conversation, a couple people, yeah, I see some hands over there. My goal is to make us all feel uncomfortable, because it's not unless we have uncomfortable conversations that we can really move. So my goal in life is to be an agitator, to be honest with you. So it's important that we have uncomfortable conversations, right? And I know in this space, and you're like, I don't want to be judged, someone may think this. I love doing workshops where we're going to have uncomfortable conversations and honest conversations, because we can hear each other's voice, right? And not until we're comfortable having uncomfortable conversations and hearing each other's voice can we actually make movement. And once again, we'll find that we have more in common than we have not in common, right? But I think we're afraid of uncomfortable conversations. We can no longer be afraid of uncomfortable conversations. We have to be able to see things through each other's lens. It's so, so, so important. Oh, two things I forgot to tell you. There's a hand over here. I actually put on real clothes for you guys today. I haven't had real clothes on for about 2 years. I was concerned that the suit would not fit, but I didn't need a belt. I used to need a belt, just to be clear. And the other thing is I haven't actually been in person with people for over 2 years. So this is really special, so thank you for moving close. Go ahead, there was a hand here.
I mean, I'm going to be honest, I can't even get to the question of adversaries versus agitators. I see both of those things, and basically my response is sheer terror.
Okay. Terror.
Terrified.
Okay, there's a hand back there. Thank you. Terrified. I appreciate you sharing that, because most of us are afraid for a number of reasons, right? Go ahead.
When I look at those pictures, I try to separate the issue that the individuals were standing for,
yes,
versus the individual. And so I would say that both crowds have both adversaries and agitators in them, because it's an individual value or choice or how you respond to it.
Thank you. Other thoughts? Okay. We could just spend the whole time here. By the way, I normally do 3 hours just to talk about one of these subjects. I'm going to try to do as much as I can in about an hour. Go ahead.
To be honest with you, after the murder of George Floyd, I stopped watching the news and only knew about the insurrection from others. The other thing is that there was so much going on that I reached a saturation point where I was having trouble processing and trying to find a way to channel and be productive in how I move forward. I was moved to activism, but how can I do this in a way that would result in the change that needed to happen?
Thank you for sharing. Can I share with you? So I had a few meltdowns. Am I the only person who had a few meltdowns last year? I'm by myself? Okay, I can be by myself. I had a few complete meltdowns. I was convinced. Anyone watched like Handmaid's Tale or any of those kind? Yeah, I was like, okay, the world's coming to an end. I need to figure out how to get away from here. Everything is bad, because especially with news, right? Everything you turned on, somebody was being shot or dying. It was either COVID or someone was killed. We were all enemies. There was no love. I was like, this is completely hopeless. I had complete melt, and I'll just let you know, I actually left the bench because I was like, I have to do something more, because I don't like feeling powerless. Anyone else feel powerless last year? Yeah. I can't do powerless. I have to figure out what we can do collectively to make things better. And I think that's why you all are here. What can we do collectively to make things better, right? I don't want to spend more time on this one. Let me go back to the next one.
2 people are in police custody in 2 different states involved in 2 separate shootings in Kenosha, Wisconsin. The first is Jacob Blake, the victim of a police shooting, shot in the back Sunday as he walked away from officers. Tonight, Blake lays in a Wisconsin hospital, paralyzed from the waist down and, according to his father, handcuffed to his bed. The second is 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse, who was seen on video shooting 3 people Tuesday night on the streets of Kenosha. Rittenhouse was officially charged with 5 felonies today, including 2 counts of homicide.
We're protecting from the citizens, and I just got pepper sprayed by a person in the crowd.
Rittenhouse was interviewed shortly before the shootings and was asked if he was using non-lethal rounds.
We don't have non-lethal.
So you guys are full on ready to defend the property?
Yes, we are.
He's now awaiting extradition to Wisconsin from Illinois, where the former police cadet was able to drive back to after the shootings, despite walking with his hands up towards police.
For him to even be able to shoot somebody and still walk away from the scene. I mean, they talked about finding a knife inside of the car, not even on Jacob Blake's person, but this guy's carrying around a long gun, killed somebody, just walking freely, was able to get back home to Illinois. Then, we got a much bigger problem on our hands.
Thoughts? Go ahead.
These videos it enrages me, it causes me pain and anguish, especially because I have 2 black boys in the hotel room, 19 years of age, one going to the Citadel, one going to Mercer University Mechanical Engineering. However, being an elected official, I am always afraid when my black son leaves my house to go to work, to go to campus, and if he's not back by midnight or even 11 o'clock because he's hanging out with his friends, and he's an Eagle Scout. He's not perfect, but almost close. But anyway, really, great guy. But I am afraid that something like this will happen to him because he's speeding, that he'll be gunned down. And let's be honest, this other character, walking with the gun, if that was my son with one of his grandfather's guns in the car because they like to go hunting, he'd have his brains blown out. And that's the reality that I live with every day, being a black elected official, elected 3 times in my community. Agitator, adversary, I'm agitated right now.
Yeah, thank you. Any other thoughts? There's one here in front.
My reaction to these is sadness. We assert that our country has things figured out. We don't. We assert that we can communicate and share and collaborate. I'm not so sure.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other thoughts, comments? Back here.
I mean, if that isn't the definition of white male privilege, I don't know what is. It is just beyond outrageous to me, but unfortunately to me it's a bellwether of where we are in this country right now. And whether you say political with a capital P or political with a small letter P, I don't know how people can see that and not say that there's fundamental change at the political level where we have an opportunity to vote how this can continue, because this happens because people in political positions are allowing this to continue. So it makes me really, really angry.
Yeah.
For me, watching video clips like this always elicits an emotional response. But when I see things like this, I initially see the media being the agitator because I never get the full story. I get bits and pieces because it wants to elicit emotional response. So when I take a moment to think, and I go, I want more. I want more of the story, so then I can come to my own educated response in relation to what I'm seeing, because I don't trust what we see. We get pieces. So that's how I feel.
Right. So the African-American male, you know, it was a DV call, right? They were calling him, he had a history of domestic violence. Does that change your point of view? Just curious. No. Okay. But you're right, we get pieces of the story, right? Any other thoughts or comments? I promise we're not going to cry the entire time. That's not my goal. So this is interesting. This is actually the last gentleman's sister.
Say the name Jacob Blake. Make sure you say father. Make sure you say cousin. Make sure you say son. Make sure you say uncle. But most importantly, make sure you say human. Human life. Let it marinate in your mouth, in your minds. A human life. Just like every single one of y'all and everywhere around the world. We're human. And his life matters. So many people have reached out to me telling me they're sorry that this happened to my family. Well, don't be sorry, because this has been happening to my family for a long time. Longer than I can account for. It happened to Emmett Till. Emmett Till is my family. Philando, Mike Brown, Sandra. This has been happening to my family. And I've shared tears for every single one of these people that it's happened to. This is nothing new. I'm not sad. I'm not sorry. I'm angry. And I'm tired. I haven't cried one time. I stopped crying years ago. I am numb. I have been watching police murder people that look like me for years. I'm also a Black history minor. So not only have I been watching it in the 30 years that I've been on this planet, but I've been watching it for years before we were even alive. I'm not sad. I don't want your pity. I want change.
So I thought what was interesting about what she said was really twofold. One is reminding us that we're all human, right? And so I did say there was a DV case is the reason the police called, but she was like, don't forget, this is somebody's brother, somebody's son, somebody's father. And when we look at the folks that are in front of us, we have to remember the human part of it, right? We all have our stuff. We all have our challenges, but there's still a human behind the end of it, whether we think we have something in common with them or not. We all have our stories, right? And then the other thing that I thought, well, there's a few things. Her response to trauma, did anyone pick up on that? She's like, I don't even cry anymore, I'm just numb, right? How many of us look at folks and expect them to behave a certain way, right? If that was me, I would blah, 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 and they don't respond the way that I expect them to. So when you guys are in your lives, I'm not saying the C word, when you guys are in your lives or around your families or you're dealing with someone else's stuff, how many of you expect a person to respond a certain way and then cast a judgment on it if they don't respond the way that you would expect them to in the same situation, right? And I appreciate you all sharing the stuff that we can see things through your lens, right? So, because our country is so fantastic, we always find a villain. There's someone who must be the cause of anything that's happening. So, how many of you are aware of the Asian and Pacific Islander hate that's been happening in our country? Yeah? Okay. That's our model minority, right? And now they become the villain, right? So folks that have been trained to be the model minority, I don't know if any of you all were in the session when Martin talked about the struggle within his culture to be able to speak out about the hate that's taking place because they're not allowed to speak out. They're not allowed to be disruptors or agitators because that is not what the Asian American does. The Asian American sits and they're compliant and they're a hard worker and they're super smart. but now they're called to be agitators because who else is going to speak on their behalf? Any thoughts in this space? So last year, hate incidents among Asian Americans had doubled, nearly doubled. Anyone surprised? It nearly doubled. And it wasn't just, shunning and I hate you, but people were being shot and killed. People were being stomped on the street. People were being attacked on the subway. Often by other folks who are also being abused by community and underdogs. How disturbing is that? Any thoughts in this space? Is it too fresh? We don't want to talk about it. There's a hand here. Thank you.
I just have to say that Asians haven't been persecuted just this year. Right. Asians have been persecuted for a long time, not just this year. Elderly Asians in my neighborhood were tied up years ago. Years ago, tied up because they were Asians that people thought had money in their house, they were elderly, they were tied up and left in their house. So it wasn't just this year, everyone's pointing at this year. It wasn't this year. It's been a long time. If you go look at one of our towns, they have where the Asians were chased out of the town and put in concentration camps.
Yes.
Okay, so I just wanted to say that it's not just this year.
I thank you for bringing that in. I was going to add internment camps, right? So, go ahead.
This country has passed laws, the Chinese Exclusion Act. Native Americans were not considered citizens, 4/5 of a human being.
Right.
The Electoral College, because it was a compromise to make sure that people couldn't vote and we could continue to have slavery. There's a variety of things that have been done in this country. And so, as Martin said, if we truly go back and we talk about conquering colonization, as opposed to now we're into immigration, we start talking about why we have some of these issues that we have going forward, and we can address them, but we don't want to go back there because it's painful.
It's painful. Yeah. If you have a festering thing on your body, what do you need to do? Do you cover it up? You have an infection, it's festering, it's just eating up your body. What do? Somebody say anything? You treat it? How do you treat it? First, you get the infection out. Cut it out. Open it up. Yes. So this is really interesting, right? But every time our country's in crisis, we have to find a villain. Anybody remember September 11th? Right? So September 11th, what year do you think that is? I know you can't see the numbers on there, but what year do you think it is that it just spiked really, really high? That's Muslim Americans. Anyone guess? 2001. Anybody surprised? No. You know what's really interesting? I like the quote over here is that we are so small-minded sometimes that some of the people who were largely attacked were Sikhs, right? They're not even Muslim. They're Indian. But we don't know the difference, right? You wear a turban, you're evil. Okay. The other thing that's interesting and fascinating about our country is that sometimes we do things that have unintended consequences. So I want to share one with you that's not the obvious. We know about redlining, we know about segregation, we know about the lack of resources in schools. Here's one more to think about.
My work has really reshaped how the public understands swimming as an issue of social equality, social justice, and social inequality.
Professor Jeff Wilsey from the University of Montana is the author of Contested Waters. He is a rare expert on the racist history of swimming. A conversation with him opens our eyes to the dark side of something that is usually seen as bright and joyful. From the beginning, he squashes a common fallacy. Black people aren't physically built to swim.
During the 19th century, people of African ancestry were more accomplished swimmers than people of European ancestry. They were more likely to be swimmers, and they were more likely to be better swimmers.
It's what happened in the 20th century that changed everything.
There were thousands of public swimming pools that were built in the United States during the 1920s and 1930s.
It was a swimming revolution. At a time when there was no air conditioning, people suddenly had a way to find wonderful relief from the heat. But not everyone.
The vast majority of these pools were for whites only. And the Jim Crow pools that were accessible to Black Americans tended to be small, much less desirable.
For generations, the public swimming pool became a classic example of white supremacy. Even though pools were funded by government money, hard-working, tax-paying minorities across the country were not allowed. Even as courts started ordering public pools to be made available to all people, our society continued to evolve in hateful ways.
There were literally tens of thousands of private club swimming pools that were developed in the United States during the 1950s and 1960s. Almost without exception, these tens of thousands of pools were for whites only.
And those public pools that were now integrated were being shut down because white people refused to use them. And swimming pools became battlegrounds. White mobs would attack any person of color who had the audacity to enter. Perhaps the most significant confrontation was in St. Augustine, Florida, 1964, when African Americans and other protesters jumped into an all-white motel pool. What happened next has become an iconic moment in the civil rights movement.
The manager of the pool poured acid into the water as a way to drive the protesters out of the pool, which to my mind, it reveals sort of the viciousness of the sentiment behind objecting to interracial swimming. It caused a backlash against racial discrimination in a variety of forms.
One of the reasons this became the moment is because the architects of the civil rights movement showed up, Reverend Ralph Abernathy and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
We weren't allowed to swim with white children. They thought that we had cooties or something like that.
Donzale Abernathy is Ralph's daughter. They were dear friends with MLK. In fact, it was King who taught Donzale how to swim, but in a friend's private pool. Public pools were unavailable. She remembers St. Augustine and how her dad and King knew it was time to fight.
I know that they were arrested in St. Augustine, and I know that they confronted the man who owned the Munson Hotel, and I think they were arrested there after confronting him.
It is now a famous photo. Two giants in jail together, fighting for the right to swim.
Oh, there's Officer Clemens.
Even Mr. Rogers would join the fight. In a beautifully crafted moment, he invites a black police officer into his tiny pool. Mr. Rogers and Officer Clemens were molding a new generation of thinking. Sadly, tremendous damage has been done. African Americans now struggle around water due to a century of being denied.
Swimming doesn't get passed down from one generation to the next. And instead, what has gotten passed down is actually a fear of water.
If you want to understand how racism from the past continues to leave its ugly mark, listen to this.
Black Americans are about half as likely to know how to swim as white Americans, and that black children are, depending upon their age, 3 to 5 times more likely to drown than white children.
Up to 5 times more likely to drown. A cool pool on a hot summer day may be pure joy for some, but not all. Hate from the past continues to pull us under.
Isn't that interesting? The unintended consequences. I'm sure at the turn of the century when they were thinking about not allowing people to swim in pools, and what they weren't thinking about, generations later, folks will be drowning 3 to 5 times more likely. I like this example because it's not one that we would think about, at least I wouldn't think about. Is that one that you would normally think about? I don't know, maybe it is. I had a person I call aunt. In the African American culture, people that are older than you, whether you're related to them or not, if they're close to your family, you call them aunt, just so you know. She told me that when she was growing up, that it was her black nurse that told her black people couldn't swim because their bones are too dense. Bones are too dense. These are the kind of narratives that continue to happen. This is just one example. I kind of like it because it's not one I would have thought about. We think about the obvious ones, but there's unintended consequences to things that we do. Any thoughts or comments in this space? No? Is there a hand? No. Okay. But this was a long time ago. We don't discriminate against people in swimming anymore, right? This is a long, long time ago? Oh, I'm sorry, the Olympics. So in the Olympics this year, there is a young girl from Britain who, just for those who don't know, African Americans could do fantastic things with our hair. It grows big, it grows small, we can make it short, we can make it thick, it can make it straight. My hair happens to be straight now. If it wasn't straight, it would be about this big. So, and so if we want to protect our hair from chlorine and other things, we need a cap that can contain our hair. But you know, it's not common for us to have such things because remember, we don't really swim because of what just happened previously on the last video. But for those of us who do swim, we need the equipment to allow us to swim. But because that's not a norm for us, people don't expect to help build in norms. So right now, it's being reconsidered because of the outcry. But she wasn't allowed to use her swim cap. Now I'm wondering how a swim cap for a person that's not shaped and has more hair would somehow give someone an advantage. I don't know, maybe you guys have thoughts about it. But discrimination in swimming, that was a long time ago, right? Thoughts, comments? Now everyone got quiet? What happened? There's a hand here, thank you.
I guess the positive thing, because I think we do have to look at positive things.
Absolutely.
Is that the outcry was absolutely immediate. I mean, it was like 1 second later and there was outcry. And the governing body, like 2 seconds later, said, oh yeah, we got to reconsider that. So, I mean, that is definitely progress.
I have a question. Do you think if 2020 wasn't the year from heck, people would have still had the same level of outcry? I'm just curious. If there weren't so many agitators?
Probably not.
Okay, there's hands over here.
Respectfully, I disagree in regards to progress, because if there hadn't been agitators, sure, they wouldn't have reconsidered, but the fact that their thought process from the beginning made such a decision or even had to consider such a decision shows the lack of progress, actually. And it is the public opinion that changed it, but in our everyday lives, we make individual decisions that have collateral consequences, or we believe things that we're told that have collateral consequences that don't get corrected in that way, that we aren't held accountable for. And so I don't know, I mean, sure, there's been a lot of conversation. I personally am not convinced that there's been enough progress, I should say, to be measurable.
Thank you. There's a hand over here too.
That decision shows that not only, because as a judge, we talk about our implicit biases that we bring to the table. Well, the people that are on FEMA have implicit biases that they brought to their decisions that they don't take into account, obviously. And it's not just that governing body, but other governing bodies for a variety of different things that all have the implicit biases that go back to this is how we view our world. You know, that 5 circles you have, who we are, how we view them.
Thank you. Any other thoughts or comments? No? Okay. There's a hand over here.
think this one, as well as the previous video about the history of swimming, me and my wife have talked to our kids. My wife was adamant in trying to get our children to learn how to swim. It's no secret that there is kind of the, quote unquote, blacks don't swim. And not really knowing the history, this video points it out. I think one of the things is, like with the swimming cap, I think there's probably a lot of things that are kind of built into society that we never really question why it's that way. And I think the same thing probably with the swimming cap is because if there are not a lot of African Americans swimming, okay, the swimming cap has been made to fit the swimmers that we've come accustomed to. No one ever thought about, well, hey, should a swimming cap be different? Does it need to look like this? And I think there's just a lot of things that are the way they are, but we don't really know the history of why they are. And I think if we are open enough to say, well, do we need to have this rule? Is it, like obviously right now with Sha'Carri Richardson and, okay, she can't run because she smoked marijuana. Well, is that really performance enhancing? Well, obviously it's on the ban list. Should it be on the ban list? No, obviously it was at the time. But these are just questions that we can start looking at and really seeing if the rules that we have in place need to be there.
Appreciate your comments. Yeah, you have a round of applause over there. Any other thoughts or comments? So over here.
My comment is this, just like the Asian hate crime, just like all of it's the elitists that fear something different. Yeah. And having a black swimmer in the Olympics is something different. So it's whether it be LGBTQ, whether it be Asian, whether it be black, it's the fear of not being like them.
Yeah. I don't want to jump forward to future slides, but do you think they have a lot of African Americans, the judges at their tables, who also swim? Just curious. No? Okay. So that's where so many of us come in, right? We can be allies in these conversations. How many of you guys recognize this photo? Yeah? 68 Olympics? Right? Who's the guy in the front? Who's the guy in the front? He won second place. He actually holds the title for Oceania, or we call Australia, the continent of Australia. He still holds the title for that continent, for this race. Second place. That's Peter Norman. So what's really interesting about this, and I might look at my notes so I don't mess up anything, is Peter Norman is an ally. So do you see the pins that they're wearing? Can you guys see let me see if I can do this. Let's see. So on their jacket, you see that circle? Okay, so they're all wearing that circle. Anybody ever noticed that before? Okay, so that is the Olympic Project for Human Rights. OPHR, it's a word acronym, I don't really know what that would mean, but it's OPHR, Olympic Project for Human Rights. They created an organization that year to take a stand against all the injustices that were happening worldwide. So it was against apartheid that was happening in Australia, South Africa, segregation that was happening here in the United States. It was 1968. It was the civil rights movement. And they were wearing that pin. Peter Norman said, and they went to him, they said, Peter, do you believe in human rights? He said, yes, I do. They asked him another question. They said, do you believe in God? They said, yes, I do. Peter Norman was raised under sort of the practice of the Salvation Army, right? And he said, I will stand with you. And it's funny because you talked about John Carlos. Carlos said they expected to see fear in his face, but instead they saw love. That is so significant to me because Peter Norman could have just been like, you guys are making me uncomfortable. I don't know what I'm going to do with you. I don't want any part of this. But instead he said, I want a pin too. So there was a white American rower who also was wearing a pin. By the way, they all had their titles ripped from them. And he gave him his pin so that he could stand with them in unison. They had one set of black gloves and they wanted to do the fist. And Peter was like, do you have a third glove? And they said, no, we only have one pair. It was Peter Norman who told them, we'll put one on each hand so that you guys can do the fist. So if anyone notices, they have different hands going because that's one pair of black gloves. Interesting, right? Now, do you think that was easy for him to do? No. I see a lot of heads saying no. So let me tell you about Peter Norman. Not to scare you, but let me tell you about Peter Norman and his life. So 1968 Summer Olympics. That's what that picture is from. They all had their titles ripped from them, even though they won first, second, and third place. Tommy Smith and John Carlos got to come back to America in the middle of the civil rights, revolution, and they were dealing with segregation, they were dealing with being ostracized and their titles ripped from them, but they also had a movement that was taking place. Peter Norman went back to Australia. Do you think he was embraced with open arms? No. Matter of fact, although he had qualifying scores in 1972, they did not allow him to compete in the following Olympics, even though he still to this day holds the title. Well, he's passed away, but his title is still the title for that continent. He was denied the opportunity. His entire family was ostracized. It was hard for him to find a job. He was no longer able to compete professionally. He became a PE teacher. In 2000, the Olympics was in Sydney. He is our reigning champion. Do you think they allowed him to be part of the Olympic Committee? They said, we would like for you to be part of the Olympic Committee. All you have to do is say that what Tommy Smith did and John Carlos did was wrong and you had no part of it. You have to denounce what they did. And we will allow you to have this position and be part of the Olympic Committee in Sydney. He said no. He said, I believe in human rights. I'm not doing it. In the 80s, during a charity race, he pulled his Achilles heel or tendon, something like that. I know I sound like this is all going to be depressing. I promise it won't be. But it then went gangrene. It almost was amputated. He then struggled with depression, alcoholism, and painkillers. And in 2006, he passed away from a heart attack. Oh, I forgot. In 2000, Australia would not allow him to be part of the Olympic Committee, but America invited him to come and join them. The U.S. Track and Field Association invited him, so he got to be part of their party and attend their events. It wasn't until 6 years after his death that Australia said maybe we were wrong. 6 years after he passed away, they actually did a public apology, and they said, he in fact was a hero. We were wrong. He should have competed, and everything he stood for was right. 6 years later. So the reality is, sometimes it's hard to be an ally. I mean, I acknowledge it. So sometimes when we're not courageous, and you guys took a lot of courage to move forward, sometimes it's hard. Doesn't always have to be, but sometimes it's hard, right? So sometimes when we want people to be allies and we're not seeing them being allies, they are afraid of the worst case scenario. But I want you all to be encouraged. Let's talk about another one. Marilyn Monroe and Ella Fitzgerald. Anybody recognize this picture? A couple people? Okay, I'm aging myself. So everyone knows Marilyn Monroe, right? Yeah? So Marilyn Monroe's voice teacher told her, if you want to become a better singer, you've got to listen to Ella Fitzgerald. I do appreciate Marilyn Monroe. She's never been close to Ella Fitzgerald as far as I'm concerned. Maybe a little biased there. But anyway, so Marilyn in 1954, she went to go see Ella perform in Los Angeles. She immediately was in love with her and thought she was absolutely fabulous. So Ella was performing a lot of small clubs. She couldn't get a big club. And so Marilyn was like, I'm going to make sure you get to perform in big clubs because everyone needs to be able to hear you. There's no reason why you should only be in small venues. So she went to the owners of the Macombo Club and she said, look, I need you guys to have her perform. They had actually had 2 African Americans perform. It was Dorothy Dandridge and Eartha Kitt. And they said she can't perform. Do you know why she couldn't perform? She was too black and too overweight. She didn't fit the blacks that we were okay with letting them come and be in our presence. She couldn't cross over mainstream enough. There was a couple different discrimination levels going on there, right? So as an ally, Marilyn said, I tell you what, if you let her perform, I will sit in the front row every single night that she performs, and you know Marilyn brought a crowd with her wherever she went, and I'll bring a bunch of celebrities when I come. So after some negotiation, they did a 3-week stint for her, allowing her to perform in this club in March of 1955. On the very first night, Marilyn came, and she brought with her, my brain is skipping me for 1 second. Oh, Frank Sinatra and Judy Garland. And so, of course, that brought a big old crowd. Do you know she sold out every night after that? Every single night. They extended her stay there. After that, she got big clubs all over the world. But you know what's interesting about that? She still had to come in through the back door. So a few years later, Marilyn once again went to go visit her to see her perform in Colorado. And she saw them ushering Ella to the back door. And she stood at the door and she would not go in. And the manager was like, you're Marilyn Monroe, you gotta come in, because what will this do for our club? The press is gonna know you're here, everyone's gonna know you're here, we're gonna be a big deal. She said, I'm not going in. She said, unless she walks in the front door with me, I refuse to go in. And I will stand here and protest. And guess what? Do you think Ella got to go in the front door? So they walked in the front door together. Ella never walked through a back door again. Another story of an ally, right? It didn't cost her anything. She got to hear good music, front row seats, but she got to be an ally. So we saw another ally a minute ago. Whoops, that's in the wrong place. So, Mr. Rogers. Anyone love Mr. Rogers or just me? Okay, yeah, I'm a total Mr. Rogers fan. I've talked to a couple people here who don't know who he was, and I was like, am I that old? Anyway. So Mr. Rogers was a subtle ally. He was always pushing us to look at something different in a happy way, right? Mr. Rogers was an ally. And does everyone love Mr. Rogers? Yeah, anybody not love Mr. Rogers? It's okay, it's safe space. Okay, all right. Megan, another ally. I know people might have a lot of ideas about kneeling. I know we're kind of split all over the place. So Colin Kaepernick, everybody remember him? Yeah? Do you remember how many people joined him after a while? Do you remember how the conversation has shifted over the last year or so about the very thing he was talking about in 2016? And Megan joined him because she said, I know what it's like, right? She said, I'm a lesbian. And sometimes my country that I love greatly disappoints me, and I want people to know we got to do better. Silent protest. I know we have different views about this, right? But she's another ally. So what can we do? I think we should pause. I think sometimes we need to just pause. So if you see the dots, that means pause is an acronym for me. So what does the acronym mean? The first one is we need to pull our heads out of the sand. Someone joked with me yesterday and they said, oh, you didn't want to put the real word in there. But anyway, pull our head out of the sand, right? And so, as someone else reminded me yesterday, this is the age of information and access, right? So for us to be ignorant at this point is kind of silly. We need to take some time, look around, we need to educate ourselves, we need to understand and lean into difficult conversations. We cannot be afraid of them, right? Let's look at something.
This is my phone. This is my phone. 4 words that were the beginning of a heated exchange between this unidentified woman and a 14-year-old boy and the boy's father.
You don't have to explain nothing to her.
Take the case off, that's mine. Literally, get it back.
Are you kidding me? You feel like there's only one iPhone made in the world?
No, okay, then show me the,
show me all my... you get a life.
The father is prominent trumpeter Keon Harold. He's played with some of the biggest names in the recording industry: Beyonce, Rihanna, Jay-Z, 50 Cent, Eminem, the list goes on. But on Saturday, this happened.
My son has nothing to do with her.
No.
I'm trying to figure out what's going on in the lobby.
Then show me the proof. No, he's not leaving. Show me the proof.
Keon Harold and his son, who were staying here at the Arlo Hotel, went downstairs for brunch when the woman accused the boy of having stolen her iPhone.
What, you see 2 black people?
No, I'm not letting him walk away with my phone.
She then physically assaulted the boy more than once, according to his father's social media posts. They've been viewed some 2 million times and counting. The incident happened almost exactly 7 months to the day
I'm going to tell them there's an African-American man threatening my life.
of this encounter in Central Park, where Amy Cooper, a white woman, falsely reported that African-American bird expert Christian Cooper was assaulting her. She was later criminally charged. She talks about how an Uber driver apparently turned in the woman's missing phone that she retrieved later. The hotel has apologized to the Harold family, calling the incident, quote, violence, unquote, and saying that for its part, quote, more could have been done to de-escalate the dispute.
So that's actually 2 incidents in one, right? We have the Coopers, then we have the hotel. It's funny, I had an interesting conversation with a colleague recently. Well, I guess it wasn't that recently, it was last year, about the phone incident. They said, well, why didn't they just show her the phone, that it wasn't theirs? What do you guys think?
Showing the phone isn't going to prove that it isn't hers.
Go ahead, you good? You want to do good? Go ahead.
Just showing the phone isn't going to prove that it isn't hers. I mean, you could have my phone, and I don't know if it would become immediately evident that it's not that it is my phone, or it still could be your phone. That doesn't prove anything.
You have a hand over there.
You probably felt, what right do you have to ask me that question? What proof do you have that I took your phone? I mean, it's just, how dare you would be, and I think it's a completely appropriate response that they had. Yeah, how dare you?
Right. Thank you. There's another hand over here.
That was going to be my response as well. Why do they even have to prove it?
Any other thoughts, comments? There's a hand over here. There's a couple hands. We're getting our steps in today.
She was already too riled up. She wouldn't have cared if she looked at a phone.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't have mattered anyway.
Yeah. There's a hand over here. Change your mind. So there's another hand right here.
I think in the conversation at the table, I was kind of agreeing, is I think a lot was her delivery of coming at them, accosting them, saying, hey, you stole my phone. One of the things I'm thinking about now is like when you travel, and they always tell you, because luggage can look the same. Right. So put something on the outside that completely makes it look like it's yours, because other times, I've seen people, you pick up the wrong bag, oh, I'm sorry. So if you go to someone, if you think that's your phone, excuse me, I misplaced my phone, yours looks very similar, would you mind, I just want to make sure that's not my phone. There's a way that you can approach people if you think, someone has taken your phone. I think when you accost people by saying, hey, you stole my phone, that's completely, it's accusatory, as opposed to saying, I lost my phone, it looks similar, I'm looking for a phone that someone may have picked up.
Well, what's funnier is that she said, take off the case. I don't know if you listened to her. She said, take off the case. That's my phone. So they stole her phone, put it in another case, and then walked right in front of her. So after they came out of the elevator. But she said, yes, there's a hand over here.
Even if she said in a kind tone to me, please show me your phone, I believe you have it, I would not show her my phone. It's my phone. I pay $191 a month for service. I'm not showing you my phone. I don't have to show you my property. And it almost reminds me of, slavery, and when you had freed slaves or freed African humans and enslaved, and if you were free, you had to show proof that you're free. I mean, it's ridiculous. Like, what gives someone the right? Show me that, give me the receipt for that tie. It looks like a tie I bought my father. Why?
And there's a hand over here, and there's one in the back. Do you have a second mic? Yeah.
And I just think it's really interesting that the hotel manager also made the assumption that the son had the phone. And you see that over and over again, where black people are being accused from white folks. The automatic assumption is that that person stole the phone. You see it in history. You saw it. That's how Tulsa started. That's how Rosewood started. So this is it's nothing new. It's just reoccurring. It's evolving. It's coming out in different ways, and we're seeing it in these videos. And thank God for video cameras. Thank God for cell phone cameras now.
So you think the manager need to pull his head out of the sand? I don't know, just asking. There's one more back there.
Yeah, just watching that video, it just made me think that the woman was trying to get some form of publicity from it or some sort of attention, because the way she kept pushing and pushing, and the way the party responded, the father and the son, they were trying to get away from her, but she just kept approaching them, engaging them, thinking possibly they were going to react to her or do something to her. I don't know, to me, it just sounded like she wanted some form of attention.
Yeah, there was a lot. And then it was in the Uber. They've already heard that it was at the end, it was actually left it in our Uber. Uber driver brought it back. So, right. Yeah, she was charged, she said she was charged with a hate crime. Go ahead.
I don't want to disagree with anything that's been said, because personally, if I was accosted like that, I would be very defensive. But at the same time, just by showing a photo or the home screen or something like that, by that quick proof, and maybe it's passive of me, but I want to quickly de-escalate. And if something as simple as, hey, no, this isn't yours, look, right now, it could have turned out differently. And I look for that hope.
Yeah. Cool. There's two other comments over here.
So, I lost my phone. I pay insurance every month in case I lose my phone. It's not worth it putting somebody in a position to prove that they haven't done anything unjust behind a phone. It's a phone. I shouldn't have to prove, because of the color of my skin, because that's how it comes across, that I didn't do something illegal. That's what we're tired of. The assumption that we are guilty instead of assuming that we're innocent. I don't have to prove to you this is my phone. You prove that it's not. And no, I'm not going to show you anything. That's why you get insurance and just replace the phone. There are so many things that happen to people who look like me when we're just accused of things. It even leads to our death. So that's what you have to consider, is that what might happen to you is different than what happens to people who look like me. And the consequences are severe and fatal. So think about that. Think about what you're asking somebody who doesn't look like you to have to prove, because at the end of the day, we all want to go home. And a lot of times people who look like me, we don't go home. It's not worth it over a phone.
There's like three other hands. I'm going to ask you guys, can you guys stay with me like 5 more minutes after my time? Is that okay? Okay, I'm gonna run a couple minutes over. Go ahead. I just wanna make sure we hear these other voices.
I didn't want to take away from what Trish said. I think that's so important, but I can tell you that when I saw the video, my emotion was more for a father protecting his son. I was so angry because here, a child, if that was my child, that guy would have been on the floor. I'm sorry. That lady would have been on the floor. You don't do that to children, and you don't take my children's things, and you don't ask to see my children's things. So that is true as well, but children, that's just what I'm seeing.
I appreciate you saying that, because there is a trauma response that the child had to experience through that, right? The presumption is I'm guilty, this woman can put her hands on me, I'm not safe, right? So that's interesting. I'm glad. He was 14. He was African-American male, and one of the things I will say in this space is that we view kids differently based on their race. We do, right? So go ahead.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, my reaction was exactly the same way. And she actually ended up on the floor, but if it had been my child, she would have been more than ended up on the floor. But you know what? My thought is, and you know what? It's something that I learned just like within the last 20 minutes. I think to some extent, my reaction as a white male was that I have the privilege of knocking the shit out of her. But, you know, and because I would have thought people aren't going to do anything to me. I'm a white male. I'm going to do it. I'm going to protect my child. And this is what's going to happen. And I don't have any fear about what's going to happen after that. Whereas, you know, that may not be true for other folks. And I think maybe to some extent that's what you were saying.
I just want to validate what our people of color are telling us. I am wife to an African American. I have two African American children, one male, one female, and they experience life very different from me. So when it's the 15th time that somebody's questioned you or hunted you down in a store or brought you out of the grocery store because they think you dented their car or is following you to make sure you're not stealing anything, that is absolutely their experience. It doesn't matter that their mom is white and their dad is black. They are treated suspiciously. So it's not just one person asking, do you have my phone? You know, it's something that's every day, every week, multiple times, all the time. And so when you're constantly looked at as the one who is under suspicion, don't be surprised when somebody responds to you in a defensive way. I mean, I think thinking through that, understanding how they're treated and viewed moment to moment by perfect strangers every single day is really an important context to understand in their lives.
Thank you. We'll do one last one. There's a hand here, and then we'll move to the next slide about approaching new people.
Thank you. I just wanted to share, I wanted to talk about the unintended consequences, what happens when assumptions are made. I'm a biracial woman. My son is, I have a black son, and he was shopping with his black father. And they were at the mall. My son is into Legos. He is a Lego engineer. And so he saw the coolest Lego box, picked it up, and was looking at the box, and my son's father was in another aisle. And a security guard came up to him and started watching him. My son was 10 at the time. And so my son put the box down, went up to, put it back, went by his dad. And then when I saw them that evening, it was explained to me what happened. And, he felt like the person he was being profiled. And he put the box down because, he felt like the guy watching him thought he was going to steal it. So a couple weeks later, I take him to the library. We go to the library, he picks out some books, and they have some self-checkout places where you can check your books out. He did not want to use the self-checkout because there was fear that they would think that he was going to steal these books. And that is what he is left with. So now when he goes out to stores, when he goes to the library where other kids can use the self-checkout, that's what's in the back of his mind, that people are seeing him at a young age as a criminal, as someone who would, steal something. And so I just wanted to tie that back into the unintended consequences when assumptions are made, when people take those actions, when you profile people, especially children. And I just had to share that.
Thank you for sharing. And bring it into adulthood. Yes. So I have a son who's 6'5½", 23, just got out the Air Force, and he's still timid in a way that I understand, but I don't want him to be. It's like claim your full space. But being an African American male that was questioned and profiled and taught to not be aggressive because people will view him a certain way. It's funny, we went to the beach recently. I live in LA. Went to the beach recently. We're coming up PCH, stopped at a restaurant, and it's always a long line. So I ordered the food online, paid for it online. We can walk to the front and get it. I said, okay, son, go in there. He was home. Go in there and go get the food. The line's around the corner. He got in the back of the line. I'm like, what are you doing? The whole reason I did this is so that we don't have to get in the back of the line. Go get the food and let's go. He would not walk past people because he's like, I'm bigger than everyone, I'm blacker than everyone. They're gonna assume that I'm cutting in front of them. And I literally got out the car, sit in the car, and I was like, let me go, because I just like being the disruptor, right? So I'm like, I'm gonna walk in front of everybody, they'll get over it. But he had a right to walk in front of everybody because it's already paid for. All you have to do is go to the pickup and grab it. But he has been trained in this. And I'll be honest, part of it is my own doing, right? So my background's in law enforcement. I was the prosecutor, not the defense attorney. I was a judge. When I got that security thing when he was driving and it got to say judge car, I was grateful because I know that they're going to run his plates before he gets stopped. That's the reality of what it is. I had more colleagues that were stopped and got tickets than I ever did because they always ran my plates first, right? So, but that was a benefit for me at some point, but it's the reality of what it is. But let's go to the next slide. Approach new people. So part of the way that we could do better is if we know people other than ourselves, we could see things through other lenses, right? We need to expose ourselves to new people. We need to talk to people about what their experiences are and challenge yourself to talk to people who don't agree with you so that you can dig deeper into why they think the way that they think. So.
I would describe my political views as the new right.
I'd say that I'm left.
Feminism today is man-hating.
I would describe myself as a feminist, 100%.
I don't believe that climate change exists. We're not taking enough action on climate change. I think it's about time these people got off their high horse and started looking for credible problems that actually exist.
It's absolutely critical that trans people have their own voice.
That's not right. You can't, you're a man, be a man, or you're a female, be a female.
Women do need to remember that we need you to have our children.
Could I be friends with someone that says a woman's place in the home?
Right, okay, well, I'm an expert at flat packs. If you have any trouble, just watch me.
So it looks like I've got your instructions here.
I think so.
Let me help you.
Let's have just that bit there.
Describe what it is like to be you in 5 adjectives.
Okay, frustrating.
Dedicated.
Opinionated.
Lucky.
Ambitious.
Offensive.
Solemn. I have ups and downs.
Strong.
I want to say attacked. Misunderstood.
Name 3 things you and I have in common.
We're both male, we're both confident, and we're both loudly spoken.
We know each other better than people who've known each other for 10 minutes should.
You seem quite ambitious and positive, and you've got this really, got a glow. Do you know what I'm saying? Your aura's pretty cool.
I'm sensing, are you former military or something?
People have said that, but there is no history. So are you then? Ex-military?
Yeah.
If you're ex-military, I'm very proud of you already.
Well,
so
I grew up in a bit of a rough state. I've experienced homelessness. I've known what it's like to have absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm definitely most grateful just for life.
We've only just met, but I think you're the sort of person that would listen to me and we'd have a discussion rather than argue. Yeah, you're good to hang out with, man.
Let's go. My chance.
Goodness sake. You're right, mate. Fitter than I look.
Perfecto.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
So basically, I think we just built a bar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here you are. Each take a bottle and place it on its corresponding markings on the bar.
Attention. Please now stand to watch a short film.
Feminism today is definitely an excuse for misandry, man-hating.
If somebody said to me that climate change is destroying the world, then I'd say that is total piffle.
So transgender, it is very odd. We're not set up to understand or see things like that.
I am a daughter, a wife. I am transgender.
I feel like the battle for feminism definitely isn't done. The fight is never going to be over, if I'm honest with you.
You now have a choice. You may go, or you can stay and discuss your differences over a beer.
I'm only joking.
You're happy for a second then.
Well, I'm having a drink. I'm having a drink.
Yeah. I want to discuss.
Beer.
Yeah, beer and discuss.
Cheers.
At the end of the day, mate,
About
I've
reaching
enjoyed
out to
working
people,
with you.
yeah. And, you know, even if you wanted to convince people about your point, the productive thing to do would be to sit down and have a
Engage,
beer.
engage.
I've been brought up in a way where everything's black and white, but life isn't black and white.
Yeah, I'm just me.
Yeah.
Smash the patriarchy.
I'll give you my mobile number, you give me yours, and we'll keep in touch. I'd have to tell my girlfriend that I'll be texting another girl. She might be a bit upset with that, but I'll have to get round that.
I'll have to tell my girl.
What do you guys think? Yeah, okay, I hear a couple of claps. I love that. Not endorsing Heineken. I've actually never had a Heineken, but I like the messaging behind it, right? And I know we're running out of time, so I'm not going to open up to a bunch of discussion, but I think it speaks for itself, right? Okay. Approach new people. Understanding. We've talked about this a lot, about putting yourself in other people's shoes, right? Empathy is so powerful, right? It's so powerful to be able to have those conversations. And you need to open up your mind to other folks' differences. I understand that I will never understand, however, I'll stand with you, right? There's some things that we will not understand because it's not our experience, but we can still work together for solutions, right?
Hey, line up! Line up! Everybody line up! We're about to race! Everybody line up! Shoulder to shoulder, take off your backpacks. Basketball, line up, we're about to race. Hey, we are racing for a $100 bill. The winner of this race will take this. A $100 bill. Before I say go, I'm gonna make a couple statements. If those statements apply to you, I want you to take 2 steps forward. If those statements don't apply to you, I want you to stay right where you're at. Take 2 steps forward if both of your parents are still married. Take 2 steps forward if you grew up with a father figure in the home. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a private education. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a free tutor growing up. Take 2 steps forward if you've never had to worry about your cell phone being shut off. Take 2 steps forward if you've never had to help mom or dad with the bills. Take 2 steps forward if it wasn't because of your athletic ability, you don't have to pay for college. Take 2 steps forward if you never wondered where your next meal was going to come from. I want you guys up here in the front just to turn around and look. Every statement I've made has nothing to do with anything any of you have done. Has nothing to do with decisions you've made. Everything I have said has nothing to do with what you've done. We all know these people up here have a better opportunity to win this $100. Does that mean these people back here can't race? No. We would be foolish to not realize we've been given more opportunity. We don't want to recognize that we've been given a head start. But the reality is we have. Now, there's no excuse. They still got to run their race. You still got to run your race. But whoever wins this $100, I think it'd be extremely foolish of you not to utilize that and learn more about somebody else's story. Because the reality is, if this was a fair race and everybody was back on that line, I guarantee you some of these black dudes would smoke all of you. And it's only because you have this big of a head start that you're possibly going to win this race called life. That is a picture of life, ladies and gentlemen. Nothing you've done has put you in the lead that you're in right now. When I say go, on your mark, get set, go! If you didn't learn anything from this activity, you're a fool.
Speaks for itself. Yeah. Sometimes we forget about the advantages we have, right? And take them for granted. So, I'm almost there. S, stop and think, right? Sometimes we react before we have a chance to think about it, right? Stop and think. Don't automatically make assumptions. We talked a lot about assumptions today, about assuming how people think, how they should respond. And when you put different characters in the scenario, would your assumption be the same, right? So we can think about the phone incident, we can think about other swimming incidents, we can think about other things and put other characters in those same scenarios. Would we have come to the same conclusion, right? Would that person have come to the same conclusion? I hope no one's offended, but this is really funny to me. Okay.
So you're not good at golf, but you're white.
People of color have to deal with racial microaggressions every single day. So microaggressions are those little unintentional insults that basically see people of color as stereotypes, which got me thinking, what if white people had to deal with racial microaggressions?
So like, where are you from? No, like, where are you really from?
Why don't you have an accent? Like a Swedish accent.
You know, your English is really, really good. It's like I can't even tell you have an accent or anything.
I don't have an accent.
No, that's what I'm saying. You don't speak Gaelic?
You don't speak German?
Can you say a curse word in European?
You know, like, what does that even mean?
Hey, Connor, you know about NASCAR stuff, right? Can you take a look at this?
Can you teach me how to line dance?
Play the banjo?
Act entitled in the supermarket. I love white food. No real flavor to it. Never an upset tummy.
You're so exotic.
How do you get your hair like that? I love how it's so limp. Ew, why does it feel like that? Oh my God, so it just does that? No, you are really pretty for a white girl.
Your eyes are so round, like this.
You know who you look like? Kenny Chesney. Zach Braff.
Emma Stone.
Rachel Maddow. My friend Chad. Maybe you know him, because he's white too.
No, Emma Watson.
Not Macklemore. What's the other guy?
No, is it Emma Thompson?
It's CHAD, like Chad.
One of the Emmas. You look like an Emma.
You know who you look like? I bet you hear this all the time. Jeffrey Dahmer. How does it feel to be the token white guy in the office? Hey, Connor, can we get a white perspective on this? I love everything about white culture. You guys are like so fun. What do you mean you don't listen to Creed? You're white.
You've never tried meth.
But you're white.
You don't act like a normal white person.
You're not really white, though.
You're not really white.
I'm whiter than you are.
So, did all your ancestors own slaves?
No, but of course he wishes that he could still own slaves. That's a part of his culture.
Bryce, back me up on this one. The thing you have to understand about white culture
No, I
is
went
that
to
white
an
people are...
historically white college, so
okay,
I know about
but I
white culture.
backpacked
Okay, it
in
was
Europe.
So can you say how ridiculous this was? I know. Story of my life. If you've ever experienced microaggressions because of your race, gender, sexuality, or body type, go ahead and vent about it in the comments.
Can you teach me how to, like, take a really popular rap song and, like, make it a ukulele song? It's so cool. I think it's so cool how you guys do that.
I'm just curious. Has anyone here ever experienced a microaggression? Yes? Just a couple? Anyone ever actually committed a microaggression? Yeah. My hand's up for both. I like that. I think it's hilarious. If I offended anyone, I apologize. It's a safe space. But I like it because it helps you think about some of our behaviors, right? Okay, we're almost there. Last one is E, exercise courage. So some of you took that huge step by moving closer to the front. I still thank you for that. It made the conversation a little bit easier for me. So as we're exercising courage, we need to have conversations with our family members. How many people have family members who say things that you might find appalling or egregious, but you don't want to engage? Yeah, exercise courage. How many of you are parents? How many of you have materials, dolls, toys, or books in your home of other cultures for your children besides your own? That's exercising courage. How many of you guys travel in places that you've never heard of before, maybe don't speak the language, and the culture and food is different? That's exercising courage. There's so much we can do. Active listening is exercising courage, right? Developing empathy, exercising courage. Oh, they had a C word in there, darn. There's things that we can do in our workplace, in our communities, exercise courage. You guys can develop programs. If you have a courtroom, which I'm sure you all do, where people do evictions, why not work with the local government to have people who do housing, rapid rehousing in your place, right? There's families that have family court, and you can have resources there to exercise courage to address those types of things. Remember that being silent is another form of being compliant. By your inaction, you're actually taking an action, you're standing with the person who's the aggressor in the situation. So it's important that we exercise courage. And nowadays, in some situations, inaction can also lead to class action, for those of you who are in a court government. So exercising courage is really, really important. So once again, the pause. Pull your head out of the sand, approach new people. U is for understanding, S is for stopping and thinking, and E is to exercise courage. And so with that, I want to start back where we began, that as you leave this conference and you're taking with you all your stuff, hopefully you're taking new tools, deciding to leave some baggage behind, maybe collecting new things to take with you. I mean, the sessions were really, really interesting for the ones that I attended. And so there's great stuff here. There's lots of resources out there. You know, I have at least 3 hours of video content just on any one of these topics if you're interested. And there's something that someone sent to me that I just want to read in closing. Everyone you meet today is a human. They are a being who fears something. They love someone. They've all experienced some sort of loss. Know this, respect this, and be extra kind. And in practicing the pause, pause before judging, pause before assuming, pause before accusing, pause before reacting harshly. Remember, we are all imperfect beings on this journey together with all of our luggage. Thank you for your time and have a safe trip home.